Dad, just stay quiet. You do not know about these things. He said it in front of everyone, in front of his father-in-law, in front of his wife, in front of the guests, as if I were an old dog that is no longer useful for anything. But I also invited someone that night, and when he walked in, nobody else laughed. If this story touches your soul, subscribe. Every day we share a story that could be yours. Tell us from which country you are listening. My name is Michael Anderson, and I am 62 years old, and that night my son spit in my face. Not with saliva, but with words. Dad, just stay quiet. You do not know about these things. He said it just like that, in front of his father-in-law, in front of his wife, in front of all those elegant people who looked at me as if I were an animal in a zoo. And they all laughed, everyone, except me. I stayed there with the fork in my hand, feeling my throat close up, feeling my chest tighten. But I said nothing. Not yet, because I had a plan. A plan that none of them expected. We were at his house. A big house with shiny hardwood floors and paintings on the walls that cost more than everything I earned in a year. I had put on my best shirt, the blue one, the one I use for funerals and birthdays. I combed my hair with gel. I washed my hands 3 times before leaving scrubbing. Hard trying to get out the grease stains that never come out completely, but they were still visible. They are always visible. My mechanic hands. My hands of an old man who worked all his life under the sun, fixing engines, changing oil, getting dirty so my son could have his hands clean. And now those clean hands were pointing at me, silencing me, humiliating me. I arrived at 8 o'clock sharp. I rang the doorbell. I waited. The door opened and there was Daniel, my son, 42 years old. Gray suit, expensive watch, perfume that smelled like money. He looked me up and down, just that. He did not hug me. He did not smile at me. He just looked at me and said, "Hi, Dad. Come in." Just like that. As if I were the plumber. As if I were someone who came to fix something and then leave. I went in, and there I saw them. The long table, the crystal glasses, the lit candles, and Robert Evans, my son's father-in-law, sitting at the head of the table. Dark suit, slicked back hair, gold ring on his finger. He extended his hand to me without getting up. "Nice to meet you." And I shook it, feeling mine sweating. I sat at the end at the farthest edge from everyone, as if it were a punishment, as if I were the child who misbehaves and is sent to the corner. No one asked me how I was. No one offered me anything. Daniel poured wine. Red wine, expensive in glasses that I was afraid to touch. Robert started talking about investments, about the stock market, about shares that went up and down. Daniel's brothers-in-law nodded. Sarah, my son's wife, smiled. And I was there, quiet, invisible, until I opened my mouth, until I made the mistake of believing that I could also have an opinion. I once saved up for... And that was it. That is when the blow came. "Dad, just stay quiet. You do not know about these things." Daniel said it looking at me with that smile, that fake smile one puts on when they want to hide that they just stabbed you with a knife. Everyone laughed. A low, uncomfortable laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. Robert cleared his throat and continued talking as if I did not exist. Sarah looked at her plate. The brothers-in-law looked at each other, and I stayed with my mouth open with the words stuck with my heart beating so fast I thought it was going to explode. I clenched my fists under the table. My nails dug into my palms, but I said nothing because I never said anything. I always kept quiet. I always swallowed it. I always endured. But that night was different. That night I had also brought someone who had not arrived yet, someone who was going to change everything. And while they continued there talking about their perfect lives, about their businesses, about their trips to places I will never know, I only thought about one thing, about the moment the doorbell would ring, about the moment he would walk through that door. And then, yes, then everyone would shut up. Everyone would look at me, and my son would understand who I was. He would understand that the old man he humiliated also had dignity, also had his story, also had his value. Robert raised his glass. A toast, he said, to family, to success, to the future. Everyone raised their glasses. I raised mine. But I did not toast. I just held it in the air, watching the wine move inside, red, dark, like blood. And I thought, family? What does this guy know about family? He did not raise Daniel. I did. I fed him when there was nothing in the fridge. I kept him warm when it was cold. I bled working so he could study. But there was that man, toasting to family, and my son smiling at him as if he were his real father, as if I did not exist. I continued eating, or trying to eat, because every bite felt like a stone in my throat. I chewed slowly. I swallowed with effort. The fork felt heavy in my hand. And then Robert looked at me. He looked at me with that look I knew well, the look of pity, the look that says, "Poor unhappy wretch, what is this guy doing here?" And then he looked at Daniel, and he made a gesture to him, a small gesture, as if saying, "Your old man is rustic, right?" And my son smiled. He smiled as if saying, "Yes, I know? Sorry." And that was it. That is where something broke inside me, something that had been cracking for years, and that night it finally broke. But I was not going to scream. I was not going to make a scene. I was not going to give them the pleasure of seeing me explode. No. I was going to do something better. I was going to recover my dignity. I was going to show them who I am, not with words, with facts, with the person who was about to arrive. I looked at the clock, 9:30. Half an hour left. Half an hour for everything to change. Half an hour for that table to fall silent. For Robert to stop smiling. For Daniel to understand that he underestimated the old man. That he underestimated the man who gave him life. The man who broke his back so he could be there, in that house, with those clothes, with that life. I looked back at my plate. The food was cold. I was not hungry. I only had rage. A cold rage. Calculated. A rage that was no longer pain. It was something else. It was determination. Because I had decided something that night. I had decided that I was not going to continue being invisible. That I was not going to continue being the hindrance. The embarrassing old man who sits at the end of the table and keeps his mouth shut. No. That night, I was going to speak. I was going to show. I was going to demonstrate. And them? They were going to listen. Even if they did not want to. Even if it hurt them. They were going to listen. And then in the middle of that conversation about business and trips and success, I smiled. A small smile that no one saw, because no one was looking at me. But I smiled, because I knew something they did not know. I knew that in 30 minutes that doorbell was going to ring, and when it opened, everything was going to change. Everything. And my son. My son was going to learn a lesson he would never forget. A lesson about respect, about dignity, about not spitting in the face of the man who gave you everything. Daniel was born in March of '83. His mother was named Grace, black hair, loud laugh, soft hands. I fell in love with her like an idiot. We got married fast. She got pregnant. I thought we were a family. But when Daniel was 3 years old, Grace left me a letter on the table. I cannot do this anymore. I need to live my life, just like that. She left, and she never came back. I was left alone with a little boy who cried for his mommy every night, a little boy who asked me, "When is mommy coming back?" And I did not know what to tell him. So I hugged him, and he cried, and I cried too, but in silence, because men do not cry. Or so I was taught. I had no idea how to be a father and mother at the same time. I did not know how to cook. I did not know how to comb hair. I did not know how to wash clothes without dyeing everything a weird color. But I learned. I learned by force. I woke up at 5 in the morning. I dressed him. I made him breakfast. Toast with butter. Chocolate milk. I took him to my aunt's house. She took care of him while I worked. I came back at noon. I fed him. I played with him for 10 minutes, and I went back to the shop. I arrived home at 8 at night. I bathed him. I read him a story. I put him to bed. And only then, when he fell asleep, I threw myself on the couch, dead, without strength even to take off my shoes. There were days when I did not even have money for the bus, days when I had to choose between buying bread or milk. I always chose the milk. Always. I could endure hunger. He could not. He was little. He needed me. I remember one time. Daniel was 5 years old. He got sick. High fever. Cough that would not stop. I took him to the hospital at 3 in the morning. The doctor told me he needed a syrup, an expensive one. I did not have a single dollar. So I left the hospital. I woke up a friend. I borrowed money. And I ran back. I bought the syrup. And that night I stayed awake, sitting by his bed, putting cold cloths on his forehead, praying like I never prayed before. And he got better. Thank God. Daniel's birthdays were sacred. It did not matter if I had to work double shifts. He always had his cake, his candles, his gifts. I remember his 7th birthday. He wanted a bicycle. Red, with training wheels. I did not have money. So I got an old bicycle, all rusty, with broken pedals. I spent 2 weeks fixing it. I painted it. I put on new training wheels. I changed the seat. And on his birthday, I gave it to him. He screamed. He jumped. He hugged me so tight he almost knocked me to the floor. Thanks, Dad. It is the most beautiful one in the world. And for me, that was worth more than anything, more than any money, more than any rest. But not everything was nice. There were dark nights, nights when I came home without having earned anything, without a dollar, and I had to pay the rent. I had to buy food, and I did not know how. I remember one night. Daniel was 8 years old. I got home. I sat at the table. I put my head in my hands, and I cried. I cried like I had not cried since Grace left, and suddenly I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Daniel. He looked at me with those big eyes and said, "Dad, do not cry. I am going to take care of you." And he hugged me, and I hugged him. And I knew I was not alone, that I had a reason to go on, a reason to get up every day. The years passed. Daniel grew. I got older. My hands were no longer so fast. My back hurt more. The nights were longer, but I continued. I kept working. I kept giving him everything. I paid for his school, the supplies, the clothes, the shoes, everything. He never lacked anything. Well, he never lacked anything material. Because love, he had plenty of love. I loved him more than my life, and he told me, "I love you, Dad," every night before sleeping. And I thought we were a team, that we were two against the world, that nothing was going to separate us. But I was wrong. When he finished high school, he told me he wanted to study at the university, business administration. I did not even know what that was, but I told him yes. I got an extra job on weekends. I fixed motorcycles at my house at night, with a lamp hanging from the ceiling. I went to bed at 2 in the morning. I got up at 5. But it was worth it, because my son was going to be someone. He was going to have a degree. He was going to have a better life than mine. A life where he did not have to get his hands dirty, where he did not have to choose between bread or milk, where he could be happy. That was the only thing that mattered to me. But then he started to change. I do not know when. I do not know at what exact moment. But Daniel started to drift away. He no longer told me his things. He no longer asked me for advice. He arrived late. He locked himself in his room. And I thought it was normal, that it was part of growing up. But then he started bringing friends. Friends with expensive clothes, with brand-name sneakers, with new cell phones. And when I went in to say hello, he got uncomfortable. The friends looked at me, and I realized that I was the embarrassment, the dirty old man, the mechanic, the one who did not fit into his new life. One day he asked me not to go out in slippers when his friends came over. "Dad put on sneakers. It is just that it looks bad. It looks bad." Those words hurt me, but I said nothing. I put on sneakers. Another time he asked me not to talk about my job. "Do not tell them you are a mechanic. Tell them you own a shop. as if my work was not dignified, as if I were something to be ashamed of. I swallowed hard. I nodded, because I did not want to embarrass him, because I loved him. And when you love, you give in. You give in even if it breaks your soul. When he graduated, I went to the party at the university. I put on my best clothes. I sat in a corner. I saw him receive his diploma. I saw him hug his classmates. I saw him taking photos. I wanted to take one with him. But he was busy. Always busy. I approached him. I said, "Congratulations, son." "I am proud." He smiled, but it was a quick smile. "Thanks, Dad." And he went with his friends. I stayed there, standing, with my hands in my pockets, feeling that something had broken, something that was not going to come back. But I still loved him. I kept hoping he would go back to being the boy who hugged me, the boy who told me I was the best. Because we fathers are like that. We wait. We wait even if it hurts. We wait even if they ignore us. We wait because that is how we are. Because we do not know how to do anything else. Because our children are our whole life. And I just wanted Daniel to see me, to really see me. Not like the embarrassing old man, but like the man who raised him, like the man who bled for him, like the man who loved him more than anything in this world. Daniel got a job at a big company, one of those with a glass building, with an elegant lobby, with receptionists who look you up and down before letting you in. I remember the day he told me. He came home with a huge smile. "Dad, they hired me. I am going to earn well." "Very well." I hugged him. I hugged him so tight, I almost choked him. I was proud. So proud that my eyes filled with tears. "You did it, son. You did it." And he patted my back. But he did not hug me the same anymore. He no longer squeezed me like when he was a kid. It was a short hug. Quick. Like when one hugs an acquaintance, not his father. At first, everything seemed normal. Daniel came home on Sundays. We ate together. He told me about his work, about his colleagues, about the projects. I listened to him without understanding much, but I listened. Because it mattered to me. Because I wanted to know about his life. And he talked. He still talked to me. He still included me. But that lasted little. Very little. Because then he met Sarah, Robert Evans' daughter. A pretty girl, elegant, with expensive clothes, with painted nails, with perfume that smelled like money. And then everything changed. Then everything I had built with him for so many years started to fall apart. The first time he introduced me to her was at a restaurant. An expensive restaurant with white tablecloths, with waiters serving water as if it were champagne. I put on my blue shirt, the same one as always. I combed my hair. I shaved. I arrived 10 minutes early. I waited at the door. And when they arrived, Sarah extended her hand to me. She did not even give me a kiss on the cheek, just the hand. "Nice to meet you, sir." "Sir?" Not even Michael. "Sir," as if I were a stranger. We sat down. I did not know which fork to use. I did not know if bread was eaten with butter or without butter. I did not know anything, and they realized it. I saw how Sarah looked at my hands, my nails, my calluses, and I saw how she looked at Daniel. And him he looked down. After that day, the visits to my house became less frequent. Daniel no longer came every Sunday. He came every 15 days, then once a month, then every 2 months. He always had an excuse. "I'm busy, Dad. I have to work." Sarah has a family commitment, always something. And I understood, or tried to understand, because he had his life, his girlfriend, his job. But it still hurt. It hurt to reach Sunday and set the table for 2, and eat alone. It hurt to cook that stew he liked, and throw it in the trash 3 days later because nobody came to eat it. It hurt to wait. Always wait. When they got married, I thought things were going to get better. I thought Daniel was going to get closer again, that he was going to include me more in his life. But it was the opposite. It was worse. The wedding was in a huge hall, with flowers everywhere, with a 5-tier cake, with waiters serving champagne. I arrived early. I put on a suit I rented. A suit that was a little big on me, but it was the best I could get. And when I entered, a lady with a list asked me my name. I told her. She searched. Ah, yes. Table 18. Table 18. In the back. Near the bathrooms. Far from the main table. Far from my son. I sat alone, surrounded by people I did not know, people who did not talk to me either. During the ceremony, Daniel cried. He cried when Sarah entered with her white dress. He cried when they said, "Yes, I do," and I cried too, but not from happiness. I cried because I realized something. I realized that I had lost him, that my son was no longer mine, that now he belonged to another family, to a family with money, with a last name, with contacts, and I was the old man who was there because he had to be, because I am the father, but nothing more. After the ceremony, everyone went to congratulate the bride and groom. I waited for my turn. When I arrived, I hugged him. "Congratulations, son. I love you." He patted my back. "Thanks, Dad." And that was it. Nothing more. Not, "And I love you." Not a thanks for everything. Nothing. At the party there were speeches. Sarah's dad spoke. He spoke about his daughter, about how proud he was, about how Daniel was a great man, about how they formed a perfect couple. Everyone applauded. I applauded too. And I waited. I waited for my son to take the microphone and say something. Something about me. Something about how I raised him, about how I worked so he could study, about how I broke my back so he could be there in that hall, with that suit, with that life. But he said nothing. He thanked everyone. His father-in-law, his mother-in-law, the godparents, the friends. But me, he did not even name me. And I stayed there, sitting at table 18, feeling a knot form in my throat. When my grandson was born, I thought everything was going to change. I thought Daniel was going to need me again, that he was going to ask me for advice, that he was going to want me to be close to the baby. But no. Sarah and her family took care of everything. They bought the crib. They decorated the room. They chose the name. I only received a text message. Dad Matthew was born. Everything is fine, just like that. A message, as if it were a notice. I went to the hospital the next day. I brought a little gift, a teddy bear I bought at the market. Nothing expensive, but it was what I could afford. When I arrived, the room was full. Sarah's parents, her brothers, her uncles, everyone there, and I stayed at the door, hoping someone would see me, until Daniel saw me. "Ah, Dad, come in," and he made a little space for me in the back, behind everyone. I approached the crib. I saw my grandson, tiny, wrinkled, with his little eyes closed, and I felt something I had not felt in a long time. Love, pure love. I wanted to hold him. I wanted to have him in my arms. But I did not dare to ask, because everyone was there. Everyone had more right than me, or at least that is what I felt. Then Robert held him, and then Sarah's mom, and then Sarah, and then Daniel. And I just watched him, from afar, like always, like a stranger, like someone who was not allowed to touch, who was not allowed to be part. I stayed 10 minutes. I left the teddy bear on a chair and left, without saying goodbye, because no one noticed I was leaving. Months passed. Daniel got promoted at the company. He bought a house, a big house, with a garden, with a garage for 2 cars. He invited me to see it once. I went. I rang the doorbell. He opened. "Come, Dad, I will show you." And he showed me, room by room, everything new, everything expensive, everything perfect. "What a beautiful house, son," I told him. And I meant it. I was proud. But I also felt something else. I felt distance. I felt that house was not for me, that I did not fit there, that I was not welcome. And I was right, because after that day I almost never went back. Only when they invited me, which was almost never. And so I was being left out, little by little, without realizing it, or rather realizing it but not wanting to accept it, because accepting that was accepting that I lost my son, that the boy I raised, that I loved, that I took care of, He no longer wanted me close. He no longer needed me. He no longer valued me, and that hurt more than any blow, more than any insult, because it is a silent pain, a pain that eats you inside, that makes you feel invisible, that makes you feel that you are worth nothing. And I started to believe it. I started to believe that I really was worth nothing, that I was just a hindrance, an old man who already fulfilled his function and now was left over. Matthew's first birthday was in a hall, with clowns, with inflatables, with a table full of food I never tasted. I arrived alone. Daniel had told me to go, but he did not tell me what time. I arrived early, too early. There was nobody yet, only the hall staff setting things up. I sat on a chair, and I waited. I waited like always. Then people started to arrive. Sarah's family, the friends, Daniel's co-workers, all elegant, all with big gifts, wrapped in shiny paper. I carried a wooden car. One I made myself, because that is what I know how to do, work with my hands. But when I put it on the gift table, I realized that my gift looked like garbage next to the others. During the party, I sat at a table to the side. No one came to talk to me. No one asked me who I was. I just watched. I watched how Daniel held Matthew, how they sang happy birthday to him, how they blew out the candles, and I was there, present, but invisible. At one point, Robert approached Daniel. He put a hand on his shoulder, and he told him something, I do not know what. But they both laughed, and then Robert looked in my direction. He looked at me for a second, and I saw that look again, that look of pity, of sorrow, that look that says, poor guy, what is he doing here? And I looked down, because I could not stand that look, because it made me feel small. Then came more birthdays, more parties, more gatherings, and it was always the same. I arrived, I sat down, I watched, and I left, without talking to anyone, without anyone talking to me. I became a ghost that appeared because he had to appear, because I am the grandfather, because I am the father, but nothing more. At one of those parties, a lady asked me who I was. I am Daniel's dad. I told her. She looked at me surprised. I did not know Daniel had a dad. I did not know Daniel had a dad. Those words hurt me. Because it was true. Nobody knew. Because he never talked about me. Because I did not exist in his life. Not really. One day Daniel invited me to lunch. Just him and me. I thought it was a good sign that he wanted to talk, that he wanted to get closer. We went to a restaurant, a quiet one. We ordered food, and we started chatting. But it was not like before. It was not like when he was a kid and told me everything. Now he talked about numbers, about projects, about things I did not understand. I just nodded. And at one moment, I dared. I asked him, "And how is Matthew?" He smiled. "Good. He is big now. He talks a lot." "And does he say Grandpa?" I asked him. Daniel stayed silent. He looked at his plate. "Not yet, Dad. But he will say it. He will say it." But I knew he would not, because Matthew almost never saw me, because to him I was a stranger. On another occasion, Daniel asked me to accompany him to a company event. "It is informal, Dad. Come." And I went. I put on my blue shirt. We arrived. There was music, food, drinks, people chatting. Daniel introduced me to some colleagues. He is Michael, my dad, just like that, without pride, without emotion, like someone introducing someone they have to introduce. And the colleagues shook my hand. "Nice to meet you." And they left. Nobody asked me anything. Nobody had interest. And I stayed standing there, with a glass of soda in my hand, watching how Daniel laughed with others, how he talked to others, how he was happy, without me. But the worst was one afternoon, a Sunday afternoon. Daniel called me. "Dad, can you come over? I need you to help me with something." I jumped from the chair. It had been months since he asked me for help, months since he needed me for anything. I went running. I arrived. I rang the doorbell. He opened, and he took me to the garage. "Look, this broke. Can you fix it?" It was a chair, a wooden chair with a loose leg, nothing serious. something that could be fixed in 10 minutes, and I fixed it, with my tools, with my hands. And when I finished, I told him, "Ready, son." He looked at the chair, "Thanks, Dad," and he turned around. He did not offer me coffee. He did not ask me to stay. He did not ask me how I was. He just used me, like a tool is used, and then he put me away, like a tool is put away, until the next time it is needed. I left that house with a knot in my chest. I walked to the bus stop. I sat on the bench, and I cried. I cried there, in the middle of the street, without caring who saw me, because I realized something. I realized that to my son I was no longer his father. I was the mechanic, the one who fixes things, the one who is useful for that, but nothing more. And that destroyed me. It destroyed me because I gave him everything, everything I had, everything I was, and him he only saw me as someone useful, not as someone loved. The months passed, and the humiliations continued, small, almost invisible, but they hurt the same. Like that time I went to his house without warning. I rang the doorbell. Sarah opened. She looked at me surprised. "Ah, Michael. I did not know you were coming. I was passing by. I wanted to say hello." She stayed standing in the doorway. She did not invite me in. "Daniel is not here. He went to work. And Matthew, he is sleeping." And she stayed there, quiet, waiting for me to leave. And I left, without saying goodbye, feeling that I was not welcome even in my own son's house. Or like that time I saw a photo on social media, a photo of Daniel, Sarah, Matthew, and Sarah's parents, all together, in a park, smiling, happy, and I was not there. They had not even told me they were going out. It had not even occurred to them to invite me, and I wondered, am I such a small thing, so insignificant that I do not even deserve a call? And the answer hurt me, because the answer was yes. Yes? To them I was insignificant. I was the old man who was left over, the one who contributed nothing, the one who was better left out. Every time I went to a family gathering, every time I sat at that table, I knew I did not belong. I knew it by the looks, by the silences, by the conversations that cut off when I arrived, by the laughs that died down. I was the intruder, the one who did not fit, the one who ruined the perfect photo of that elegant family. And I accepted it. I accepted it because I did not know what else to do, because I thought it was my fault, that I was the problem, that if I were different, if I had more money, if I spoke better, if I dressed better, then yes, they would accept me. But no, it was not that. It was that they simply did not want me there. And so I arrived at that night, to that dinner, to that moment where everything exploded. I arrived tired of enduring, tired of shutting up, tired of being invisible. And that time I had also brought something. I had brought someone who was going to change everything, someone who was going to show them who I am. Because I also have my story. I also have my value. And even if they did not recognize it, others did. And that night, everyone was going to know. The food was already served. A cut of meat I did not know the name of, with a dark sauce on top, with vegetables on the side that looked like they were from a magazine, and glasses of red wine shining under the candlelight. Robert raised his. He looked at it against the light. "Excellent choice, Daniel. This Malbec is one of the best." Daniel smiled proud. "I knew you were going to like it, Robert." Robert, he called him Robert, his father-in-law, with confidence, as if they were friends, as if they were equals. And I was there quiet, with my glass full, not daring to drink, because I did not know if it was okay to drink before the toast, because I knew nothing of those codes, of those rules they handled as if they were natural. "Michael, do you drink wine?" Robert asked me. Everyone looked at me. I felt the heat rising up my neck. "Yes. Sometimes," I said. My voice sounded hoarse, weak. Robert smiled, a polite smile, fake. "Ah, that is good. This is a reserve wine. It has body. It has, how to say it, personality. And he laughed. Daniel's brothers-in-law laughed too. Sarah looked at her plate, and Daniel. Daniel looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. Shame. Shame of me. Shame because I did not understand wines. Because I did not know what body or reserve meant. Because I only drank cheap wine. From a carton, the one I bought at the corner store. And everyone knew it. Everyone noticed it. We started eating. I cut the meat. It was soft. Too soft. It melted in the mouth. "It is delicious," said Robert. "I had it brought from a special butcher shop, aged meat." Everyone nodded. "Incredible," said one of the brothers-in-law. "You can tell the quality." And they kept talking about cuts of meat, about aging, about grills. And I just chewed, slowly, trying not to make noise, trying not to attract attention. Because every time I did something, I felt everyone looking at me. I felt I was doing something wrong, that I was eating wrong, that I was breathing wrong, that my mere presence was a mistake. At one moment, Robert started talking about investments, about the stock market, about shares he had bought. "The market is volatile," he said, "but if you know how to move, you can earn a lot." Daniel listened fascinated. "And what are you investing in now?" "In technology. Startups. The future is there." The brothers-in-law gave their opinions. Sarah nodded, and I understood nothing. But I dared to say something, because I did not want to be invisible, because I wanted to be part. I once saved up to buy and that was it. That is when the knife went in. "Dad," Daniel cut me off, with a smile. With that damn smile. "Better stay quiet. These are complicated topics. We do not want to bore you. We do not want to bore you." Those words, as if I were a child, as if I had no brain, as if I could not understand. And everyone laughed. It was not a loud laugh. It was a low laugh, uncomfortable, but a laugh nonetheless. Robert cleared his throat. "Well, let's continue." And he kept talking, as if I did not exist, as if nothing had happened. And I stayed there, with my mouth open, with the words stuck in my throat, feeling my eyes burning, feeling my chest closing. I gripped the fork, so hard my knuckles turned white. I took a deep breath, but the air did not enter well. I was drowning in that silence, in that humiliation, at that table where I meant nothing. Then came the second stab. Robert looked at my hands. I had them on the table, next to the plate, and he looked at them. He stared at them. And then he said to Daniel, "Hey, your old man has worker hands, doesn't he?" And he laughed, a soft laugh, as if it were an innocent comment, but it was not. And everyone looked at my hands, my stained hands, my hands with calluses, my hands with scars, my hands that worked all my life so he could be there, so he could have that house, those clothes, that life, and I hid them. I put them under the table, as if they were something dirty, as if they were something to be ashamed of, and I felt rage, a rage rising from my stomach, burning me inside. But I said nothing, because I never said anything. Daniel smiled. "Yes, my old man is a mechanic, worked with his hands all his life." And he said it like that, apologetically, like saying, "Excuse my father for being this." And Robert nodded. "Ah, mechanic, what a noble trade." Noble. He said it as if it were charity, as if he were doing me a favor by recognizing my work. And I swallowed hard. I swallowed poison. I swallowed humiliation, because that was the only thing I could do. Swallow. Always swallow. And I looked at Daniel. I looked at my son, and I did not recognize him, because the son I raised was not like that. The son I raised hugged me. He told me he was proud of me. But that man sitting there was not my son. He was a stranger who hated me, who was ashamed of me. The third stab came with dessert. They brought a cake, an expensive cake, with cream, with fruit on top, and Robert said, "This is from a French bakery, the best in the city." Everyone tasted it. Everyone said it was exquisite. I tasted it. It was sweet. Too sweet. But I said, "It is tasty." And Robert looked at me. Tasty. It is exquisite, Michael. Exquisite. And he corrected me, as if I did not know how to speak, as if I did not know how to express myself, and the others nodded. Yes, exquisite. And I lowered my head, because I understood. I understood that for them I was a brute, an uncultured man, an old man who knew nothing, who understood nothing, who did not deserve to be there. And that is when something changed in me. That is when I stopped feeling sadness, and I started feeling something else. Anger. Pure anger. Because I realized something. I realized it did not matter what I did. It did not matter how much I shut up, how much I tried to fit in. It was never going to be enough for them. Never. Because they had already decided who I was. The poor old man, the mechanic, the one who did not fit, the hindrance, and nothing was going to change that. Nothing. Then I looked at the clock. 20 minutes left. 20 minutes until my guest arrived. 20 minutes for everything to change. And I smiled. Inside. Because I knew something they did not know. I knew that night was not going to end like they expected. Robert kept talking about his company, about his achievements, about his trips, and everyone listened to him as if he were a king, as if every word he said was gold, and Daniel looked at him with admiration, with that admiration he used to look at me with, when he was a boy, when I was his hero, but now his hero was someone else. It was Robert, the man with money, the man with success, the man I was never going to be. And I asked myself, when did it happen? When did I stop being enough for my son? When did my love stop mattering? And I found no answer, because there was no answer, because sometimes one simply stops mattering, and there is no reason, there is no logic, only pain. But that night I was not going to stay quiet. I was not going to leave with my head down. I was not going to continue being the ghost, the invisible one, the one who does not matter. No, that night I also had something to say, something to show, and I was going to do it, in front of everyone, in front of my son, in front of Robert, in front of that family that looked at me as if I were trash, because I also have dignity, I also have history, I also have value, and even if they did not recognize it, others did, and in 20 minutes, everyone was going to know. Everyone was going to understand who I am. And my son was going to regret it. He was going to regret every word, every laugh, every look, everything. If you ever felt small in front of those who should love you, leave me a comment telling me your country. Sometimes knowing there are people in the world listening gives me strength to keep telling stories. We finished dessert. Robert wiped his mouth with a napkin, slowly, with elegance, as if even that were an art. Daniel, where is the bathroom? One of the brothers-in-law asked. In the back to the right, Daniel replied, and the brother-in-law got up. I also needed to go. I had needed to for a while. But I did not dare to get up. I did not dare to move, because I felt if I moved, everyone would look at me. Everyone would notice my presence, and I did not want them to notice me. I wanted to be invisible, but I could not take it any more. So I got up, slowly, without making noise, and I walked toward the hallway. Nobody said anything. Nobody looked at me, because to them I was already invisible. I walked down the hallway, a long hallway, with hardwood floor that shone, with pictures on the walls, photos of Daniel and Sarah, photos of Matthew, photos of Sarah's family, but none of me, no photo where I was, as if I did not exist, as if I had never been part of my son's life. And I kept walking. The bathroom was at the end, but before reaching it, I heard voices coming from the kitchen, and I recognized one. It was Daniel's. He was talking to someone, softly, almost in a whisper, and something made me stop. Something made me stay there, standing, listening, even though I knew I shouldn't, even though I knew it was going to hurt. I hope he leaves soon. That was Daniel's voice, clear, direct, and I felt it stabbing into my chest. He's embarrassing us, honey. Embarrassing. Me, his father, was embarrassing him. And then I heard another voice, Sarah's. I know, my love. It is obvious he does not fit in this environment. He does not fit. Those words, like knives. And I kept listening, because I could no longer move, because my legs did not respond, because I was paralyzed there, against the wall, feeling something breaking inside, something that was already cracked, but that night it shattered, 1,000 pieces, that were never going to come back together. My dad notices it, said Sarah. He asked who your dad was. It seemed weird to him that he was here. Weird. I was weird. I was the one who shouldn't be there. And then Daniel sighed, a long sigh. Tired, I know. But what do you want me to do? He is my dad. I had to invite him. I had to invite him. Not because I wanted to. Not because I loved him. But because I had to. Because it was an obligation. Like someone inviting someone out of commitment. Like someone inviting someone they do not want near. And I stayed there, with my hand on the wall, breathing deeply, trying not to make noise, trying not to explode, not to scream, not to break everything. Next time, do not invite him, said Sarah, or invent something for him. Tell him it is a work dinner, something. And she laughed. She laughed softly, as if it were funny, as if I were a problem that had to be solved. And I waited. I waited for Daniel to say something, to defend her, to tell her not to talk about his father like that I was not a problem, that I was his dad, the one who raised him, the one who broke his back for him. But he said nothing. He just stayed silent. And that silence was worse than any word, because that silence confirmed something to me. It confirmed that my son agreed, that he also wanted me to disappear, not to be in his life anymore. I stayed there. I do not know how long. Seconds, minutes, I do not know. I only know that in that moment, something died inside me. Something I had cared for years. Something I had fed with hope, with love, with patience. But that night, it died, and it was not going to revive. Because one can endure many things, can endure humiliations, can endure silences, can endure oblivion. But there is something one cannot endure, and that is hearing your son say you are a hindrance, that you are an embarrassment, that it would be better if you did not exist. That cannot be endured. That kills you. It kills you inside. Even if you keep breathing, even if you keep walking, you are already dead. I took a deep breath. I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand, because they had filled with tears, tears that were not going to come out, that I was not going to let out, not there, not in that house, not in front of them. And I walked to the bathroom. I entered. I closed the door. I leaned on the sink. I looked at myself in the mirror, and I saw an old man, a tired old man, with wrinkles, with gray hair, with sad eyes, an old man who had worked all his life, who had sacrificed himself, who had given everything, and who now was worth nothing, who was invisible, who was a problem, who was left over. But that old man looking at me from the mirror, that night he was not going to stay quiet. He was not going to continue being the one who endures, the one who swallows, the one who disappears. I washed my face. The cold water did me good. I woke up. I cleared my mind. And I remembered. I remembered the person who was about to arrive, the person I had invited, the person no one expected. And I smiled, a bitter smile, because I realized something. I realized my son did not know me. He did not know who I was. He did not know what I did in my life. He did not know the people I helped, the lives I touched, the favors I did. He only saw the old mechanic, the poor one, the one who did not fit. But there was more, much more. And that night he was going to discover it, and he was going to regret it. He was going to regret having treated me like that, having humiliated me, having made me feel I was worth nothing. I left the bathroom. I walked back to the dining room. And when I passed the kitchen, Daniel and Sarah were no longer there. They had returned to the table, and I returned too. I sat in my place, at the end, at the edge, and everyone kept talking, laughing as if nothing, as if I did not exist. And I looked at them. I looked at them with different eyes, because I no longer felt sadness. I no longer felt like crying. I felt something else. I felt determination. I felt the moment had arrived, the moment to stand up, to speak, to show who I am, and to make everyone respect me, even if they did not want to, even if it hurt them. They were going to respect me. I looked at the clock again, 10 minutes, only 10 minutes, and my heart started beating faster, because I knew that when the doorbell rang, everything was going to change. Everything. Daniel's face, Robert's face, Sarah's face, everyone was going to change, because they were going to understand something. They were going to understand that I am not just an old mechanic, that I also have my history, that I also know people, important people, people who respect me, people who value me. And when that person walked through that door, when they saw him greet me, when they saw him treat me as an equal, then yes, then everyone would understand. They would understand they were wrong, that they underestimated me, that they judged me wrong. Robert raised his glass again. Another toast, he said, and everyone raised theirs. I raised mine too, but this time I did not look down. This time I looked him in the eyes. Robert, my son's father-in-law, the man who looked at me with pity all night. And I held his gaze, and I think he noticed something, because he frowned, because he looked at me strangely, as if wondering what had changed, and I smiled, a small smile, almost imperceptible, because I knew something he did not know. I knew in a few minutes he was also going to look at me differently, that everyone was going to look at me differently, and I was ready for that moment, ready to recover my dignity, even if only for a night, even if only for a moment, but I was going to recover it. We all went back to the table. Robert asked for more wine. Daniel went to get it, a new bottle, another expensive bottle, with a gold label. He opened it with an elegant corkscrew. The cork came out with a soft sound. Pop, and he served. First Robert, then Sarah, then the brothers-in-law, and finally me, like always. The last one, the one who matters least, the one who receives the leftovers. But it did not hurt anymore. I did not feel anything anymore, because I knew in a few minutes everything was going to change. So I drank that expensive wine, and it tasted the same as the cheap one, because in the end, wine is wine, and people are people, and no matter how much they dress up as elegant, no matter how finely they speak, they remain the same. People. Just people. Suddenly Daniel stood up. We all looked at him. He had the glass in his hand, and he was smiling. That smile I knew. The smile he put on when he was going to say something important. And for a damn second, I thought he was going to mention me, that he was going to say something about me, that he was going to thank me, that he was going to recognize in front of everyone that I was the one who raised him, that I was the one who worked so he could be there. My heart beat faster. I straightened up in the chair. I looked at him, and I waited. I waited like an idiot. I waited like someone waiting for a miracle, because I still had hope. I still believed my son had some heart. I want to make a toast, said Daniel, and everyone fell silent. Everyone looked at him, attentive, expectant. I want to toast to someone very special, and I felt something like joy, something like relief, because I thought, now yes, now he is going to talk about me, and I prepared myself. I prepared myself to hear my name, to hear a thanks, Dad, to hear something, anything. But what came next, destroyed me. I want to toast to Robert, and there my world fell apart. There everything broke for me, again, like always, like all my life. Because I was never the chosen one. I was never the important one. I was never the one who deserved recognition. Robert, continued Daniel, a man who was always an example of success, of education, of integrity. And everyone nodded. Everyone smiled. And I just watched. I watched my son speak wonders of a man he had known for 3 years, a man who did not raise him, a man who did not feed him, a man who did not stay up when he was sick, a man who simply had money. And that man was more important than me. He was more valuable than me. He was more worthy of a toast than me. And I stayed there, sitting motionless, feeling a hole forming in my chest, a big, dark, empty hole. "Thanks for accepting me into your family," said Daniel. "Thanks for receiving me with open arms. Thanks for being an example for me." An example. Robert was his example, not me, not the old man who broke his soul so he could eat, so he could study, so he could be someone. No, the example was the money guy, the suit guy, the guy who never did anything for him. And everyone raised their glasses, cheers, and they clinked and drank and laughed. And I raised my glass too, because what else could I do? But I did not drink. I just held it, feeling my hand shake, feeling my eyes filling with tears. Tears that were not going to come out, that I was not going to let out. Not there. Not in front of them. Robert stood up. "Thanks, Daniel. It moves me to hear you." And they hugged. They hugged tight, like a father hugs his son. And I watched them. I watched them hug. And I felt something I had never felt before. I felt jealousy. Jealousy of that man. Because he had what I wanted. He had my son's respect. He had his admiration. He had his affection. And I had nothing. Only memories. Memories of a boy who no longer existed. Of a boy who loved me. Who hugged me. Who told me, "I love you, Dad." But that boy died. He died years ago. And in his place was a man who hated me, who was ashamed of me, who wanted me to disappear. When the hug ended, Daniel looked at me. He looked at me with that fake smile, and he said, "Are you toasting too, Dad?" And he said it with a tone everyone heard, a tone of mockery, of sarcasm, like saying, "Come on, old man, pretend you matter." And everyone looked at me, waiting, and I raised my glass, slowly, and I held it in the air and said, "Yes, I toast," and I drank. I drank that wine that tasted like poison, that burned my throat, that turned my stomach, and I swallowed. I swallowed like always. I swallowed humiliation. I swallowed pain. I swallowed the certainty that to my son I was nobody, and I was never going to be anybody. But in that moment, something happened. Something I did not expect. I felt a tear that escaped me, that rolled down my cheek, fast, silent, and I tried to wipe it. I tried so no one would see it, but Sarah saw it, and she nudged Daniel, and he looked at me, and I saw something in his eyes. It was not pity. It was not guilt. It was discomfort. He was uncomfortable because I was crying, because I was ruining his perfect moment, his perfect dinner, his perfect life. And then he approached me, he leaned in, and whispered in my ear, "Dad, please, do not do this. Not here." And I looked at him. I looked him in the eyes, and I told him, "I am not doing anything, son. I am just here existing." And he walked away, returned to his place, and they continued. They continued with the dinner, with the laughter, with the conversations, as if nothing, as if I were not crying, as if I were not breaking. And I stayed there, quiet, with the dried tear on my cheek, with my heart in pieces, but also with something else, with rage, a cold rage, calculated, because I realized something. I realized my son had no salvation, that there was nothing I could do to make him love me, to make him respect me, to make him see me, because he had already chosen. He had chosen another family, another life. And in that life I did not fit. I was left over. I was in the way. I looked at the clock. 5 minutes. Only 5 minutes. And I took a deep breath, because I knew the best was about to come. What I had planned. What no one expected. And then I wiped my face. I adjusted myself in the chair. and I waited. I waited with a smile. Because this time the surprise was not going to be for me. This time the surprise was going to be for them. For all of them, and especially for my son. For the son who forgot me. For the son who humiliated me. For the son who made me feel I was worth nothing. Because in 5 minutes he was going to discover something. He was going to discover that his old man still has dignity, still has value, still has history. Robert kept talking about his life, about his achievements, about his businesses, and everyone listened, fascinated, as if he were a god, as if every word he said was the absolute truth. And I looked at him. I looked at him and thought, enjoy it. Enjoy these last minutes of glory. Because when that doorbell rings, when that person enters, everything is going to change. And you are also going to look at me differently. And my son is going to realize that the old man he humiliated all night is not just a mechanic. He is much more than he ever imagined. And I smiled, a smile no one saw, because they were busy looking at Robert. But I smiled, because I knew the night was just beginning. 2 more minutes passed, 2 eternal minutes, 2 minutes where I only looked at my empty plate, my empty glass, my empty life. And then something happened, something even I did not expect, something that came out from inside me without asking permission. I stood up, slowly. The chair made a noise against the floor, a loud noise, and everyone fell silent. Everyone looked at me, surprised, because I never interrupted. I never spoke. I was always there, quiet, invisible. But not that time. That time I stood up, and everyone looked at me, and I felt their eyes stuck on me, and for the first time all night I was the center of attention, and I did not like it, but I did not care either, because I had nothing left to lose. Can I say something? My voice came out hoarse, trembling but firm. Daniel looked at me, and I saw panic in his eyes. Panic because he knew I was going to speak, that I was going to say something he did not want me to say. Dad, we will talk later. He cut me off, fast, nervous. But I shook my head. No, now. And I said it with a firmness I did not even know I had. And he stayed silent. Sarah looked at him. Robert frowned. The brothers-in-law looked at each other, and I remained standing, with my hands resting on the table, trembling, but firm, because I had already started, and I was not going to stop. Not until I said everything I had to say. Daniel, I looked him in the eyes. Do you remember when you were 6 years old? He did not answer. He just looked at me, confused, uncomfortable. Do you remember you got sick? High fever, cough. You would not stop crying. Silence. No one spoke. Everyone looked at me. I took you to the hospital at 3 a.m. because you had no air, because I thought you were going to die. And I felt my voice breaking. But I continued. I continued because I had to continue. The doctor told me you needed a syrup, an expensive one, and I did not have money. I did not have $1, Daniel. And I saw how he looked down, how he clenched his fists. But I did not stop. I left the hospital. I woke up a friend. At 4 a.m, I asked to borrow money. And I returned. I bought that syrup. And I stayed all night next to your bed. All night, without sleeping. Putting cold cloths on you. Praying for you to get better. And I felt my eyes filling up. But I did not cry. I was not going to cry. And you got better. And I did not sleep for 3 days. Because I had to work, because I had to pay that loan, because I had to pay the rent, because I had to feed you. And I looked around. Everyone looked at me in silence. Even Robert was quiet. And that gave me strength to continue. And you know what, Daniel? My voice rose. It became stronger. I never complained. I never made you feel bad. I never told you, look at everything I do for you. Because I loved you, because you were my life, my only reason to exist. And I saw how he swallowed hard, how his eyes turned red. But I did not stop. I raised you alone. Your mom left, and I stayed. I gave you everything, everything I had, and more, much more. And I hit the table with my hand, hard, and everyone jumped, because they had never seen me like this, because they never thought the quiet old man could explode. I worked 2 jobs, 3. On weekends, I fixed motorcycles at my house, at night, while you slept, so you could study, so you could have a better life than mine. And I walked. I walked around the table, and everyone followed me with their gaze. I paid for your university. Or did you forget? I bought you the books, the clothes, the shoes, everything. Everything you needed. And I looked at him again, and he had his head down. He did not look at me. He could not look at me, and that hurt me more. But I continued, and I never asked you for anything. Never. I only wanted you to be happy, to be someone, to have what I never had. Dad, enough. Daniel spoke, softly, almost whispering, but I heard him, and I shook my head. No, I am not going to stop, because tonight you treated me like garbage, as if I were worth nothing, as if I were an embarrassment, and I pointed at Robert. You made a toast to him, to a man you have known for 3 years, but me, you did not even name, not once, as if I did not exist, as if I had done nothing for you. And I saw how Robert shifted uncomfortably in his chair, how he looked at his glass, how he avoided my eyes, and I was glad. I was glad because he was also feeling bad, and he had to feel bad, because everyone there had to feel bad. You are ashamed of me. I said it clearly, without detours, and everyone froze. You are ashamed because I am a mechanic, because I have dirty hands, because I do not talk like them, because I do not dress like them, because I am not rich like them. And I got close to him. I got so close I could see his eyes full of tears. But do you know what, Daniel? These dirty hands, these hands that embarrass you, they are the hands that raised you, the hands that gave you everything, the hands that worked until they bled so you could be here, in this house, with these people, with this life. And I extended my hands. I put them in front of him, and he looked at them, and he broke. Dad, please. His voice was a thread, a whisper, and he had tears in his eyes, but I felt no pity. I felt nothing, only rage. Please what, Daniel? Please shut up. Please do not make you look bad in front of your father-in-law. And I turned around. I looked at Robert. Did you know that this man sitting here, this man so successful, so educated, was raised by a poor old man? Did you know that everything he has he owes to that old man? And Robert did not answer. He just looked at me. And for the first time that night, there was no pity in his eyes. There was something else. Respect, or something similar. And that gave me more strength, more desire to continue. And the worst of all, I continued, is that I would continue doing it. I would continue giving everything for you, because that is how parents are. Because even if they hurt us, even if they humiliate us, even if they forget us, we keep loving. We keep waiting. We keep believing that someday our children are going to go back to being the children they were, the children who loved us. And I felt my voice breaking, how a tear escaped me. But you are no longer that child, Daniel. You are no longer my son. Because my son loved me. My son was proud of me. My son did not treat me like garbage. And there I broke. I broke because it was true. Because I no longer recognized the man I had in front of me. And in that moment when the silence was so heavy, no one dared to breathe, the doorbell rang. And we all stood still, motionless. And I wiped my tears, and I smiled. Because the moment had arrived, the moment everyone expected without knowing. And I looked at Danielle, and I told him, my guest arrived. And I saw how his face fell apart, how he went pale. And I turned around, I walked toward the door, and I opened it, and everything changed. I opened the door, and there he was, Mr. William Sterling, 70 years old, white hair, impeccable suit, wide smile, a man anyone would recognize, because Mr. Sterling was not just any man. He was the owner of one of the largest construction companies in the country, a man who appeared in newspapers, on television, a respected man, admired, powerful, and when he saw me, his face lit up. Michael excused the delay, my friend, and he hugged me. He hugged me tight, like one hugs a brother, like one hugs someone they love, and I hugged him too, feeling something loosen in my chest, something I had held tight all night. And when we separated, I looked him in the eyes, and I told him, "Thanks for coming, William." We entered, we walked toward the dining room, and I felt the looks. I felt how everyone looked at us, how they tried to understand what was happening. Who was that man? Why had I invited him? And when we reached the table, the silence was absolute. Nobody spoke. Nobody moved. Everyone had their eyes stuck on Mr. Sterling, and he smiled. He waved. "Greetings, good evening." And then Robert stood up, slowly, as if he could not believe what he was seeing, and he stuttered, Mr. William Sterling?" And Mr. Sterling nodded. "The same. Do we know each other?" And Robert swallowed hard. I saw you in conferences. It is an honor." And he extended his hand, trembling, nervous. And Mr. Sterling shook it, but coldly, because he had not come for Robert. He had come for me. Daniel was paralyzed, with his mouth open, with eyes like plates, and I looked at him. I looked at him, and I smiled. A smile he understood perfectly. A smile that said, "See? The old man you humiliated also has his contacts, also has his history, also is worth something." And Mr. Sterling sat down, next to me, in the chair that was empty, and he put his hand on my shoulder. "Michael, how are you? It has been a while since we saw each other." And I nodded. "Good, William. Here, sharing with my family." And he looked around, he looked at everyone, and then he looked at me, and he understood. He understood everything. Because Mr. Sterling knew me. He really knew me. He knew who I was. He knew what I had done. And he knew why I had invited him that night. "Sorry I arrived late," said Mr. Sterling. "I had a meeting that ran long." And he looked at Daniel. "You must be Michael's son." Daniel nodded. He could not speak. He was in shock. "Yes. Yes, sir." Me and Mr. Sterling smiled. "Your old man told me a lot about you. He is very proud." And those words fell like stones on the table, because everyone knew that night Daniel had shown no pride in me, quite the opposite. And Mr. Sterling knew it too, because I had told him. I had told him everything, and he had come. He had come because he owed me something, because 30 years ago I had saved his life. And that night he came to return the favor. Not with money, with dignity. "How do you know each other?" Robert asked, trying to regain some control, trying to understand what was happening. And Mr. Sterling looked at me. "Do I tell him, or do you tell him?" And I made a gesture. "You tell." And he nodded. He adjusted himself in the chair and began. 30 years ago, I was a young engineer, just graduated, without a dollar. I worked on a site, and one day there was an accident. A beam fell, and I was trapped underneath. Everyone ran out, everyone except one. And he pointed at me. "Michael, he stayed. He lifted that beam with his own hands. I do not know how he did it, but he did it, and he got me out of there. He saved my life." And everyone looked at me, with different eyes, with eyes I had never seen at that table. After that, continued Mr. Sterling, I offered him a job. I offered him whatever he wanted, but he did not accept. He told me he did not need anything, that he had only done the right thing. And he laughed, a soft laugh, full of affection. That is Michael, a man who expects nothing in return, a man of those that no longer remain. And he looked at Daniel, and his tone changed. He became more serious. "Your old man is one of the most dignified men I met in my life. And if you do not see it, if you do not value it, then you are a fool." And he said it just like that, without detours. And everyone froze, because Mr. William Sterling had just called Michael's son a fool, in front of everyone. and no one dared to say anything, not even Daniel. Sarah was pale. The brothers-in-law did not know where to look, and Robert looked at me differently. There was no longer pity. There was no longer contempt. There was respect, genuine respect, because now he understood. He understood that I was not just a poor mechanic, that I had history, that I had done things that mattered, things that were worth more than any stock market investment. And Mr. Sterling kept talking. Michael taught me something that night. He taught me that a man's value is not in his bank account. It is in his character, in what he does when no one is watching, in how he treats others. And from that day, I applied that in my life, in my business, in my family. And I owe everything to him. And he put his hand on my shoulder again, and he squeezed me. And I felt something. I felt I was not alone, that someone saw me, that someone valued me. Daniel had tears in his eyes, tears he could no longer contain. And he looked at me. He looked at me with a look I had not seen in years, a look of a child, of a lost child, of a child who realized he made a mistake, a big mistake, irreparable. And he opened his mouth. He wanted to say something, but nothing came out. Only a sob that escaped him, and he covered his face with his hands. And he cried in front of everyone. And I felt no joy. I felt no satisfaction. I only felt sadness. Sadness because it had to come to this. Because I had to bring someone else so my own son would see me, so he would value me, so he would understand who I was. And that hurt more than any humiliation. Mr. Sterling stayed a while longer. We chatted. He told other stories. Stories about things I had done, things I did not even remember, like that time I helped him fix his car in the middle of the highway, or that time I gave him advice when he was about to go bankrupt. Simple advice, common sense, but that served him. That helped him move forward, and everyone listened, attentive, fascinated, because they were discovering a Michael they did not know, a Michael who was not just the old mechanic. He was someone else, someone who had touched lives, who had helped, who had left a mark. And Robert looked at me with something resembling admiration, and that gave me peace, not because I needed his admiration, but because it showed me I was right, that I always had value, even if they did not see it. When Mr. Sterling left, he hugged me again. "Thanks for inviting me, Michael. It was a pleasure seeing you." And I thanked him. "Thanks for coming. Thanks for doing what you did." Because he had no obligation, but he came anyway. Because that is how real people are. Those who do not forget, those who value, those who give back. And when I closed the door, I returned to the table, and everyone was still there, in silence, processing what had just happened. And I sat down, in my place, at the end, and I looked at them, at everyone, one by one, and I said nothing, because it was no longer necessary. Everything was already said. Everything was already shown, and they knew it. They knew that night the old man they humiliated had taught them a lesson they were never going to forget. Daniel looked at me with red eyes, with a broken face, and he opened his mouth. "Dad," but I raised my hand. "No, Daniel, not now." And I stood up. I grabbed my jacket, the old jacket I had hung in the entrance, and I walked toward the door. And before leaving, I turned around. I looked at all of them, and I said something that came from my soul. Respect is not bought with money. It is earned with character. And tonight, you all lost mine. And I left. I closed the door behind me, and I walked down the street, alone, with my head held high. Because that night, even if it hurt, even if I broke, I recovered something. I recovered my dignity, and that no one was ever going to take away from me again. 3 days passed, 3 days in which I knew nothing of Daniel, 3 days in which I returned to my routine, to my shop, to my engines, to my simple life, the life they despised. But that was mine. That was honest. That was dignified. And I felt different. I felt lighter, as if I had taken a weight off me, because I no longer had to pretend. I no longer had to shut up. I no longer had to endure. I had already said everything I had to say. I had already shown everything I had to show. And now only remained to live. Live with the tranquility of knowing I did the right thing, that I stood up, that I defended myself, that I did not let myself be trampled, and that gave me peace. A peace I had not felt in years. On the fourth day, my doorbell rang. It was 7 in the evening. I was washing my hands. I had just finished fixing an engine. I dried my hands with a rag and went to open. And there he was, Daniel, standing in the doorway with swollen eyes, with wrinkled clothes, with the face of someone who had not slept in days. And he looked at me, and he said nothing. He just looked at me. And I said nothing either. I just let him pass. And he entered. He walked to the kitchen. He sat at the table. The same table where we ate together for years. When he was a boy. When he was my son. When he still loved me. And I sat in front of him. And I waited. I waited for him to speak. Because I had already said everything. Now it was his turn. Dad. His voice broke. Forgive me. And he started to cry like he had not cried since he was a child, to cry with sobs, with hiccups, with tears that did not stop. And I looked at him crying, and I felt something. I felt pity for him, because he realized late of everything he had lost, late of everything he had destroyed. And I did not know if to forgive him. I did not know if I could, because the damage was done. The words were spoken. The wounds were open, and some wounds do not close. Some wounds stay there, forever, reminding you what happened, what they did to you, what you lost. And I had lost my son a long time ago, and I did not know if I could recover him. I do not know what happened to me, continued Daniel. I do not know when I turned into this, into someone who treats you like this, who humiliates you, who is ashamed of you. And he wiped his tears with the back of his hand. Sarah told me I am an idiot, that I lost the only man who really loved me. And she is right. She is absolutely right. And he looked at me, with those eyes that reminded me of the boy he was, the boy I raised, the boy who hugged me, and I felt something I did not want to feel. I felt my heart softening, that my rage dissolved, that my pain became smaller, because that is how parents are. Because even if they hurt us, even if they break us, we keep loving, we keep waiting, we keep believing. Robert also spoke to me, said Daniel. He told me your friend was right, that I am a fool, that I have beside me the most valuable man I could have, and I do not see him. I do not value him. And he lowered his head. He told me things I did not know. Things you did. Things you never told me. And he looked at me. Why did you never tell me anything, Dad? Why did you never tell me everything you did? Everything you achieved? And I sighed. Because that was a good question. A question I had asked myself many times. And the answer was simple. Because I did not do it so they would recognize me, Daniel. I did it because it was the right thing. Because it was what had to be done. Nothing more. And that answer broke him more. Because he understood. He understood I never sought glory. I never sought recognition. I never sought anything. I just did what I had to do. As a father, as a person, as a man. And him, he had been looking for something else. He had been looking for success, money, status. And on that path, he lost me. He lost me. He lost the only thing that really mattered, and now he realized. But it was late. Or maybe not. Maybe it is never late. While there is life, while there is love, while there is will, maybe it can be rebuilt. Maybe it can be healed. Maybe it can be forgiven. And I wanted to forgive, because I was tired of being angry, tired of being sad, tired of being broken. I forgive you, I told him. And I meant it. I forgive you because you are my son, because I love you, because I do not know how to do anything else. And I stood up. I walked toward him, And I hugged him. I hugged him tight, like when he was a boy, like when he was afraid, like when he needed me. And he hugged me too, and he cried on my shoulder. He cried like he cried when he was a child, and I let him. I let him cry, because he needed to cry. He needed to get everything out, all the pain, all the guilt, all the shame. And after a while, he calmed down, he separated. He looked at me and said, "Thanks, Dad. Thanks for not giving up on me. Thanks for still being here, despite everything." The following days were different. Daniel started visiting me more. He started calling me more. He started including me in his life. Not like before, not like an obligation, but for real, like a father, like someone who matters. And I accepted. I accepted his regret. I accepted his apologies. I accepted his love. Because in the end, that was what I always wanted. That my son saw me, that he valued me, that he loved me. And although the road was painful, although I had to break myself so he would understand, it was worth it, because now we had a second chance, a chance to rebuild what had been broken, to heal what was wounded, to be a family again, for real. One day Daniel took me to his house. He had prepared a lunch, just him, me, and Matthew, without Sarah, without Robert, without anyone else, just us three. And he introduced Matthew to me differently. "Matthew, he is your grandfather, the best grandfather in the world." And Matthew looked at me with those big little eyes, and he smiled at me, and he extended his little arms to me, and I held him. I held him, feeling my chest fill up, feeling something healing, something that had been broken for a long time. And Matthew hugged me and said, "Grandpa." And that word, that simple word, made me cry of happiness, because finally I was someone to them. Finally I mattered. That afternoon before leaving, Daniel told me something I will never forget. "Dad, I promise you something. I promise you Matthew is going to know who you are. He is going to know everything you did, everything you sacrificed, and he is going to be proud of you, like I should have always been." And he hugged me, and I hugged him too, and I knew things had changed, that we were no longer the same, that we had gone through fire, and we had come out different, stronger, more conscious, more human, and that was the only thing that mattered. Not the money, not the success, not the status, but the love, the respect, the family, the true things, what lasts, what is worth it. Today, when I look back, I do not regret anything. I do not regret standing up that night, having spoken, having invited Mr. Sterling, because that night changed everything. That night, my son understood something. He understood that respect is not bought with money. It is earned with character. It is earned with actions. It is earned with honesty, with work, with love. And I have all that. I always had it, even if they did not see it, even if I myself sometimes forgot it. But I have it, and no one can take it away from me, because that is what I am. A simple man, a mechanic, a father, but a real man, a man with dignity. And that is worth more than anything in this world. And you who listened to me up to here, did you ever feel invisible? Did the people you loved most ever humiliate you? What did you do? Did you shut up or did you stand up? Tell me in the comments. Tell me your story. Why does your story matter? Why do you matter? And if this story touched your heart, if it made you feel something, leave me your like down below. Subscribe to the channel. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes a story can change a life, can make someone stand up, someone speak, someone recover their dignity. Thanks for listening to me. Thanks for being here. See you in the next story.